Today, we are going to discuss how to run deep in online poker tournaments. Online tournaments can be extremely profitable if you study hard and develop your skills to where you're better than your opponents and you actually put in volume. You actually play a lot of games. And in this video, I'm going to teach you 3 key lessons to help you run deep in more tournaments. To run deep, you have to master the following strategies. First, before the flop, you need to make sure you know how to adjust to different stack depths. Post-flop, it is vitally important that you do not overplay your marginal made hands. And then finally, you need to have a very good mindset. You need to understand how to adjust your strategies for the different stages of the game. So, first things first, let's discuss pre-flop. When you are deeper stacked, you're going to want to use a different strategy than when you are shallower stacked. And the neat thing about poker tournaments is that you will inevitably play deep stacked sometimes and shallow stacked sometimes. And if you don't understand how to play all of those stack depths well, you're going to make lots and lots of mistakes that will add up to cost you a huge amount of money over time. So when you're deeper stacked, you're going to find that low pairs and suited connectors go up in value. Essentially hands that can make effective nut hands that are happy to put in any amount of money, like 3 of a kind and flushes and straights. These hands go up in value when you are deep stacked. And your positional advantage matters more and more and more because essentially being in position allows you to always put in an additional bet or raise when you feel inclined. And that's very, very important when you're deep stacked because you can put in a very, very big extra bet when you feel inclined. When you're shorter stacked, though, the low pairs and suited connectors are going to go down in value, and the high cards and blockers go up in value, like ace 9 offsuit. That's a perfectly fine hand when you're short stacked, but it's terrible when you are deeper stacked. It's not terrible, but it's certainly not great, right? Also, whenever you are shallower stacked, you're going to realize way more of your equity when you're out of position because if you do make any sort of hand, you can just put your short stack in because, you don't have a whole lot to lose. When you don't have a whole lot to lose, top pair is great. But when you have a ton to lose, top pair is marginal. And that is going to impact your preflop strategies. So let's take a look at some game theory optimal preflop strategies. Here we have early position, raise first in ranges. This means they fold to you. When you're in early position with 60 big blinds, you can raise with these hands in red. When you're 30 big blinds, you can raise with these hands in red. And when you're 15 big blinds deep, you can raise with these hands in red when you are first to act. And as you take a look at these charts, you'll notice the small pairs and suited connected hands are played a little bit more when you are deeper stacked compared to when you are shallower stacked, right? Like we just discussed. And also note that as you get shallower stacked, high card hands like king jack, ace 10, queen jack are played more often than when you are deeper stacked, right? So this may seem subtle, but it is relevant. And if you are consistently playing slightly incorrect ranges, that will cost you money in the long run. Now, from first position, the ranges aren't totally like super duper different, but as your position gets closer and closer to the button, the ranges are going to start to change substantially. Take a look at the 60 big blind button range compared to the 30 big blind button range. Now you see lots of small suited connectors and pairs being raised, right? Whereas over here, you see not quite as many. Okay? Also, as you're deeper stacked, your positional advantage is bigger, which allows you to play more hands just totally in general whenever you are 60 big blinds deep compared to 30. Now, if you take a look at the 15 big blind stack, we have 2 different color reds here. The light red is raise minimum, and the dark red is go all in. So when you're playing 15 big blinds deep, you actually start shoving all in a lot. And notice the range is a whole lot tighter than the other 2 ranges. And that's because your positional advantage is just substantially less. You're just taking your hand and running it into your opponent's hand. And because of that, you have to have a pretty good hand to begin with. And so if you consistently play, let's say this 30 big blind strategy, when you're 60 big blinds deep, you're going to be playing too tightly. But if you play this 30 big blind strategy when you're 15 big blinds deep, well, you're not going to be going all in and you're going to be playing way too loosely, right? And if you consistently make these errors, that is going to cost you a lot of money. These concepts also apply to when people raise before you. So let's take a look at versus a raise first in. So this is when someone raises before you. Let's take a look how your strategy is going to change as your opponent's position is later, such that they're going to be raising with a wider range. Here we're on the button, 60 big blinds deep against an under the gun raise. Here against a low jack raise, which is first position if there are 6 players at the table, and then versus a cutoff. Notice against the under the gun initial raiser, you have to be quite tight. You really don't get to 3-bet very much at all in red. You don't even get to call out much with hands in green. and you're doing a lot of folding, especially with the offsuit stuff. If the low jack raiser, or if the raiser's from the low jack instead of under the gun, you see you get to play a little bit wider. You get to do a little bit more 3-betting, but not too much of a difference. But if you're on the button against the cutoff raiser, now you get to play a lot more offsuit hands, right? Notice queen jack, king 10, queen 10, jack 10 playing every time, often calling or 3-betting. And we get to play more suited connected stuff in general. Okay, so typically as the raiser is in later position, you get to play wider. What if we were 25 big blinds deep instead, though? Well, now, against an under the gun raiser, we have to be really tight. We really don't get to do too much at all. We don't get to do much 3-betting. Against the low jack raiser, similar story. Notice we do have all ends getting in here with ace, king, ace, queen jack suited, queen jack suited, 10s, 9s, 8s, some ace X suited. And then notice button against the cutoff raise, 25 big blinds deep, you do a lot more all in with ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack, suited Broadway hands, some middle pairs, and some more ace X suiteds. Compare this, though, to the 60 big blind strategy. So take a look at this button versus cutoff strategy. Compare it to this. It's very different, 60 big blinds deep compared to 25 big blinds deep, right? We get to play way more hands 60 big blinds deep, and we're never going all in, right? Also notice the 3-betting hands are more polarized, such that we're 3-betting a lot of the best hands and then some hands that are kind of on the cusp of playability, whereas 25 big blinds deep, we're not doing much small 3-betting at all, and when we're shoving these medium strength hands that are going to have a tough time playing on various flops. So you'll see that the strategy to re-raise almost gets flip-flopped. What if we were playing 15 big blinds deep, though? Well, now, take a look at this. Button against the under the gun raiser, we do almost no calling. Compare that even to just 25 big blinds deep. Button against under the gun raise, 25 big blinds deep, we do a ton of calling, not 15 big blinds deep. This is a big difference. And if you're consistently making the wrong plays, you're going to leave a lot of money on the table. Notice in all positions, button versus a raise, 15 big blinds deep, you're just doing mostly all ends and almost no calling. Okay? Let's take a look at a few more spots. Here we have the button versus a raise first in. I'm sorry, big blind versus a raise first in when we're middle stacked. This is when we're in the big blind versus under the gun raise, big blind versus a low jack raise, and big blind versus a cutoff raise. You see lots of calling in general against the early position raisers and way more 3-betting against the cutoff raisers with these middle suited connected hands doing a lot of the 3-bet bluffing. If you compare that to 25 big blinds deep, though, take a look. Those hands always call 25 big blinds deep, and instead you start having a shoving range with the middle and small pairs and some ace X plus a few king X suiteds, right? So again, just compare these two charts. This is actually big blind versus cutoff. My bad, it says button. This is big blind versus cutoff. Big blind versus cutoff raise. In this scenario, we are 3-betting a lot of middle connected stuff. In this spot, though, not at all, right? And then as we get even shorter, 15 big blinds deep, you see a very, very clear strategy of small and middle pairs jamming, some ace X suited, some king X suited, and that's about it. But a lot of calls, right? You do still get to do a lot of calling even when you are shallow stacked because you're going to see the flop, you're going to make a pair, and you're going to put your money in. Notice actually, take a look at big blind versus under the gun, 15 big blinds deep. Compare all of these offsuit hands that get to calls to when you're playing 60 big blinds deep. Notice offsuit hands go way down in value when you're deep stacked against an under the gun raiser because now you're going to under-realize your equity a lot due to being out of position. Like imagine you do defend the queen 6 and it comes queen 7-2 and your opponent bets the flop and the turn and the river for 60 big blinds. You don't love it, right? But if you have the queen 6 for only 15 big blinds and it comes queen 7-2, you're not folding and you're happy to put your money in. So this is why you get to just generally play wider from the big blind as you get shorter and shorter. This is a concept a lot of people don't really understand. Let's discuss 3-betting strategies really quickly before we move on to post-flop play. Let's take a look at the low jack versus a button's 3-bet. So we raise the low jack, the button 3-bets, 60 big blinds deep. Here's what we do. We re-raise the hands in red, aces, kings, queens, jacks, 10s, ace, king, and a few bluffs. Call the hands in the middle, fold the hands in blue. Hands in gray we did not raise to begin with. Against a small blind player 3-betting, though, notice we do almost no 4-betting, which is kind of interesting to a lot of people. They think they should always be 4-betting aces, kings, queens, jacks, 10s, ace, king, ace, queen. But whenever you are in position, you want to call and realize your equity, right? Also notice you fold way less against the small blind 3-better because you're going to be in position. This allows you to just play wider ranges. Notice the offsuit hands usually never like to call, but the suited stuff really, really likes to see the flop. 25 big blinds deep, though, notice a very different strategy. Now we are shoving a lot low jack versus button. And, not quite as much, but still a decent amount low jack versus small blind because we're shallower. We're happy just to get it in with a hand like pocket eights or pocket tens for 25 big blinds in pretty much every scenario, because if we happen to be against a better hand, yeah, we're going to lose, but we're only losing 25 big blinds instead of 60. I know there's a lot of pre-flop charts we just went through here. Feel free to go back, rewind this video. If you do me a favor, click the like button and the subscribe button down there before you go and do it. Or even if you're not going to go do it. You need to make sure you understand good, strong, fundamentally sound pre-flop poker. And if you consistently make little errors, those errors are going to add up to cost you a lot of money in the long run. And they're easy to make. Let's discuss post-flop strategy. The number one mistake I see small stakes player make is that they play their marginal hands terribly. And the biggest reason why they play them so poorly is that they don't want to get outdrawn, or they think that because a hand was good pre-flop, it must be good post-flop. But that's just not true. In general, your marginal medium strength hands want to keep the pot small and get to the showdown. So with these hands, you're often going to want to just check and go into check call mode as opposed to bet and raise mode, because when you bet and raise with a medium strength hand and your opponent doesn't fold, well, they probably have your medium strength hand beat. Let's take a look at some examples. Here we have ace king. We raise it up. Good hand pre-flop. Button calls. Big blind calls. 10-6-3. Big blind checks. This is a spot where we have a very, very, very easy check. Because even though ace king's good pre-flop, it's not good on this flop at all. This player decides to bet small, which, is probably okay. Not the end of the world. Then the button calls. The turn's a four of diamonds. The cutoff, again, has a very, very easy check. Instead, they bet again, probably thinking, I have ace king. They didn't raise me. I could be good. Or they didn't raise me. They probably don't have anything that's all that good. But if your opponent is sitting here with a pair or a draw, they're always going to call. Reverse the 8 of clubs. We check. Opponent bets 14K. Easy fold. This player called instead. They probably called thinking, well, some draws missed, so I'm going to find the hero call. And, if your opponent is a lunatic, maybe that's okay. And to be fair, sometimes this line this player took with this ace king is actually going to work out. And they're going to win this pot, and they're going to think that that was a good play they made. But in reality, they should just check the flop and probably just check fold and be done with it and lose 2 big blinds. Instead, they played it this way, and they lost almost their entire stack for no good reason. Quite often, this player would look at this and think, oh man, he had king 10, he got lucky on me. And sure, maybe he did a little bit, but the king 10 put in 2 big blinds bad, and then another 25 big blinds in really, really good. And that is not good for you. Let's take a look at another spot. We raise the ace 10, big blind calls, 6-6-4. They check. Just check it back. Turns a jack. They check. Just check it back. Perfectly played so far. River's an 8. They bet almost a little bit more than half pot. Ace 10 can either call or fold here. I think it's fine to go either way. The really nice thing about playing your medium strength hands in this manner is that it is going to result in your opponent trying to bluff you sometimes. If your opponent is sitting here with a hand that cannot win at the showdown, they will feel at least somewhat inclined to bluff because they are going to put you on ace high or king high or queen high and just think, all right, well, I'm going to try to bet and make them fold it. And once you do check it down here, you can easily call and realize your equity. You're going to find that with your medium strength hands, you just want to get to the showdown as cheaply as possible and try to win a small pot. We do call this time. They show the 5-2 and we win. Notice if we bet this flop, they're either going to call or raise us. And if they raise us, we have to fold immediately. And they take away all of our equity. And if they call, they'll probably go check, check on the turn. And then they'll bluff the river. But then the pot's way bigger and it's going to put us in a way nastier spot, right? So as we played it this way, we just had a pretty easy call down on the river and didn't lose any money. Before we wrap it up today, let's discuss your general mindset and how to adjust to the different stages of a multi-table tournament. In the early stages, you're going to want to focus on post-flop playability, hands with good implied odds like suited connectors, small pairs, suited aces, and in general, trying to play big pots when you are in position. When you're out of position, you want to keep the pot small and manageable. When you are in position, you don't mind making the pot a little bit bigger because when you do happen to make a strong hand, you can make the pot huge and stack your opponent. The early stages are about stacking people, if at all possible. Recognize that in the early stages, it is the early stages. Don't get sad if you lose some chips. It's okay. Quite often, if you are playing a somewhat loose, splashy style where you're splashing around with suited connectors, trying to make good hands, you are going to trickle down a little bit in your chip stack. If you start with 10,000 chips, you may get out of the first 2 levels with 9,000 chips because you lost some pots. And that's okay because you gave yourself a chance to flop well and stack your opponents. You're definitely going to make a point to stay focused on how many big blinds you have and play a good, strong strategy. Don't get tilted. Don't get flustered. Don't think, oh, I need to try to win my money back. All of those thought processes are asinine. You need to just sit there and play good poker. Put your phone away and pay attention to how your opponents are playing, because quite often in the early stages, people are going to be making really, really, really big mistakes, especially on the turn and the river, often overplaying their marginal made hands like we just discussed. And if you can figure out who is going to be making those mistakes, you can get out of line and exploit them and really, really, really crush their expected value. In the middle stages of a tournament, stacks are going to start to get shorter. So you're going to want to focus more on blockers and high cards. And you're going to find that speculative hands like suited connectors and small pairs are going to go down in value, to the point that sometimes when people raise with them, you can't even play them, like we took a look at earlier in the preflop section. You're also going to want to pay attention to the mixed stack depths, because sometimes you may be playing 40 big blinds deep, and other times you may be playing 15 big blinds deep against different players, and that will impact your strategy. In general, you're going to want to focus the most on the button and the big blind, because those are the most important positions, because they get to play the most pots. So you really want to make sure you are playing those two positions really well. Also, as you get from the middle stages to the later stages of the tournament, you're going to get to the bubble, so where there are payout jumps, and that's going to really, really, really impact how you can go about playing the pot, or playing the scenarios, because sometimes you should be making a point to try to sneak into the money, often when you're a medium or shallow stack, and other times you want to be trying to build a huge stack that will give you a really good chance to actually win the tournament. And sometimes that's going to result in you taking on variance and busting near the bubble with a middle or big stack. But if you get your money in pretty good and you have a chance to get a big stack and then run everybody over and win the tournament, it's probably worth the risk. In the late stages, in general, you're going to want to look to play tighter and more aggressive in general, mainly because there's value in just not going broke. As you fold late in a poker tournament, other people have the chance to go broke. And when people go broke, you ladder up the payouts a little bit. And that results in folding actually being profitable later in a poker tournament. When you are short stacked, you're going to want to reshove aggressively, especially when you're against someone who is raising with a wide range, either because they are opening too wide in general, or because they're just in late position and they know they should be raising with wide ranges. Like say it folds to the player on the button and you're in the small blind with a 15 big blind stack, you can perhaps go all in pretty wide if you know they're going to raise with 80% of hands, which is far too many, and you think they're going to fold to an all in way too often. So definitely look for spots where your opponents are going to be making mistakes that may not seem that big, like raising a little bit too wide, but actually do become quite costly if you maximally exploit them. Always focus on who you are able to put pressure on, right? Sometimes the big stack will just be too wide by a mile. And if they are raising too wide by a mile, you really can't apply pressure to them. Sometimes the short stacks fold their big blinds way too often. In that case, you need to be raising their blinds with a wider range than you normally would, because they're going to overfold. Always consider who is going to be making specific mistakes and then adjust to take advantage of them. And kind of like on the bubble, when you are nearing the final table, you may find yourself in a spot where you should take on some variance to try to get the chip lead so that you do have a good chance to actually win. At the final table, tight and aggressive strategies are usually ideal for the medium and short stacks, because again, as you outlast other people, you make more money. With the big stack, though, you're going to usually want to be pretty loose and pretty aggressive, because everybody else is incentivized to not go broke. Also at the final table, blockers like an ace or a king go way up in value, because the game is way more pre-flop oriented. You're going to find that if someone raises and you have an ace-x blocker, it might be a pretty good spot to put in a small 3-bet, with the idea that if they 4-bet you all in, you can easily fold. And they're probably not going to do a whole lot of calling because, well, again, they're incentivized to either go all in and make you fold, or just folding it out of the way immediately. And for that reason, post-flop playability is not quite so relevant when you're playing at the final table, because way fewer hands are actually contested post-flop. And also, when someone does bust, always consider what has changed. Sometimes the chip leader may have changed. Sometimes the chip stacks on your left may become much deeper or much shallower, and that will impact your strategy. So always reassess the layout of the chip stacks and how you expect your opponents to change their strategies as the chip stacks change substantially. So that's it for today. We discussed 3 key ways to run deep in online multi-table tournaments. Preflop, you have to adjust a lot to different stack depths, as we showed you in those game theory optimal preflop charts. Postflop, you have to stop overplaying your marginal hands. This is something that happens every single time I see someone playing a poker tournament. They get something like top pair no kicker and they just load their money in. and they go broke and they think they got unlucky, but in reality, they just played it badly. And finally, you need to have a good mindset and adjust to every stage of the tournament because strategies change as play progresses further and further into the event. That's it for today. Good luck. Have fun in your games. If you enjoyed today's video, do me a favor, click the like and subscribe button down below. Click the notification bell. And if you have a friend who needs these strategies, share them this video. They will be eternally grateful. I'll talk to you next time.